Time to get started. Hi, I'm Tim O'Reilly. I'm nominally the moderator here, although I just figured that out yesterday. So we're actually wanting to run this very much audience participation style. We're going to have a brief introduction by the panelists. I'm going to ask a few questions, start conversation. But at any point, if any of you have questions that are relevant to what we're discussing, feel free to pop up to the mics, and let's see what kind of discussion we can get going. And we're also, among the panelists, you guys feel free to interrupt each other. Let's try to make this sort of fun and engaging and not the usual sort of talking heads lineup. So the subject matter for this panel was Show Me the Money, particularly talking about Web 2.0 business models. And I think we have a pretty interesting group here to talk about this, and I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves and what their relationship is to this topic, and then we'll drill down as we go along. We'll start at the far end, Michael Arrington of TechCrunch and Edgio.
You want me to introduce myself?
Yeah, go ahead.
So my name is Mike Arrington. I am the editor of a blog called TechCrunch, which focuses on Web 2.0 companies and products. The site has been up almost a year now, a little less. And actually the reason why I started it was last year my partner and I, Keith Tier, decided that we were going to launch a new company. And I really wanted to get an understanding of what was already out there, what was being created. And I didn't see any blogs that did just specifically that, so I started up TechCrunch. And today it has 100,000 daily visitors on average, something like that. I'm also the co-founder of a Web 2.0 company called Edgio, which is a new classified listing play, aggregates classified listings from the edge of the network, primarily blogs, and aggregates them into a centralized, highly vertical search engine.
So just to kind of give you a sense of just how important Michael has been to the Web 2.0 community, I realized that I had been eclipsed as Mr. Web 2.0 when there was recently a fun send-up site called Web 2.0 Company or Star Wars Character. It was a test, and with all these weird names, like, well, Meebo versus Greedo versus whatever. And the scoring system, if you got them all right, the score for the top score was Michael Arrington. Is that you? So Michael's the guy who looks at all the sites and feeds them. So anyway, Jeremy. My name is Jeremy Zawadny. I'm from Yahoo, where I've been for the last a little over 6 years now. And well, first, I never thought I'd be on stage at a Microsoft event. This is kind of interesting for me. Yeah. And I'm either here because I write a lot of stuff about this technology on my weblog, or because Yahoo has sort of earned the reputation as being the vacuum that goes around and sucks up Web 2.0 startups. But in either case, it should be interesting. I'm part of what's called our technology development team, which is a fairly new group within the company. One of our many mandates is to kind of keep an eye on what's going on outside of Yahoo in terms of new companies, new technology, and things that we need to bring into the company in one fashion or another. And so I've been just trying to keep track of what's going on and reading all Michael's work. And I've got some opinions of my own about where all this is headed and where the money is and isn't. So hopefully that'll come up in the next hour. Right, and just to add, reason why you might be uncomfortable, not uncomfortable, but surprised to find yourself at a Microsoft event. Jeremy's a noted MySQL developer and the author of our book on high-performance MySQL. So he was not working on that MySpace demo. Yeah.
My name is
Royal.
My name is Royal Ferris. I'm with Microsoft, although I've only been with Microsoft a little under 10 months. 10 months ago, a company called MessageCast that I co-founded was acquired by Microsoft. So I've started drinking the Kool-Aid, but the glass is still kind of
Is it half empty or half full?
Half empty or half full. But we were acquired to help Microsoft with their alerting platform. You know, those little messages that appear in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. Sometimes you get it when a new Outlook message comes in. Sometimes you'll get it with some information. San Francisco Giants 10, Dodgers 1. If you click on it, you're taken to the website. We were acquired not only because we have a really easy on-ramp to get everybody into that platform, but also trying to figure out how we monetize all those hundreds and hundreds of millions, soon to be billions of messages.
All right, Adam.
My name's Adam Trachtenberg, and I'm from eBay. And at eBay, where I've been for about 2 years, I sort of run the web services evangelism team. So we've really made a big effort at eBay to really open up our platform. And so we have about 100 different public web services APIs that people can interact with and add items to the eBay database, search the eBay database, do checkout. Really, the whole eBay platform is exposed. So we've really seen ourselves as a really interesting opportunity for Web 2.0 developers to integrate with our platform. And we've seen a lot of developers who have done that already. So I sort of provide some of the, hey, these are big companies that have opened themselves up, and here's how developers can integrate with our platform and sort of show some of the more real-world stuff that people are doing. And at the same time, before coming to eBay, I sort of co-founded a couple Web 1.0 companies. So I sort of have some more of the entrepreneurial experience to sort of say, these are problems I used to have, these are problems you may be having, this is how Web 2.0 changes in terms of business models, and maybe this is how it's still the same.
So let me start with you, because the eBay ecosystem really does have some people who are making money, and not just eBay.
Right.
If you go to eBay, what's your conference called? eBay.
First, we actually have 2 conferences. So, and it's back, actually, this year it's in Vegas, the beginning of June. So there's the eBay Developers Conference, which is 3 days, where we're sort of going to bring together eBay, PayPal, Skype, ProStore, Shopping.com developers. But then after that, we're going to have 10,000 plus people at the Mandalay Bay who are eBay power sellers, right. And that's where all of our developers then exhibit and basically sell a lot of their products.
Yeah, so there's a real ecosystem there, where people are building tools, and they have pretty interesting business models where they're basically taking a little bit cut of the transactions in return for using their tools. So obviously that's a tools model. What other business models are you seeing in the eBay ecosystem? So
we sort of divided up actually into about 3 different big categories. So one is the one you've already sort of talked about, which is what we call seller tools, right? So if you're a small and medium business and you're selling full-time or even part-time on eBay, you don't want to have to go through that 7-page web form that we have, which is optimized for just sort of hobbyists or other people who are just sort of selling stuff, one-off at a time, right? And so what you want is a whole integrated tool that helps you sell, it does a CRM, it does listings, it has a whole inventory database, and in that case, that really helps automate your business and it helps you save time. And in that case, a developer that builds it, is again, they write a tool, they can sell that tool to someone either for a flat fee, for a percentage of sales, or some model like that. So that's one model. The second one is more for like buyers, right? So there's a small subset of people who sell on eBay where it really, really makes a lot of money for them. But then there's the whole ecosystem of just eBay buyers who are more casual. And in that case, we've really found that an affiliate model is much more effective, right? So you're a developer, you build something, maybe you're integrating with Royal's messaging platform to say, hey, I got outbid. I want to go back to eBay and bid. In that case, if you're a developer that's enabled that, we will pay you via affiliate money, eBay actually does, to compensate you for driving essentially the attention of people more effectively than what eBay is doing. So can you give us a sense of the scale on any of these companies? In terms of revenues. I mean, what's the, is this just sort of a plug-in that, lets an individual kind of have a little nice supplementary income, or are there substantial companies being built? There's substantial companies. I mean, right now on eBay.com, 47% of listings are coming through web services interfaces, of which about 24% are coming through these third parties. So it's a significant portion of eBay's business is essentially being enabled by these developers. And I don't really know, I don't want to talk about what their revenues are, but I mean, these are venture-backed companies that have, thousands of customers. Right. So, I mean, these are real businesses that these people are operating. So, what we're really talking about here is a tools business model, ultimately. That one is a tools business model, right. Yeah. So maybe we'll come back. I have another eBay question later, but let's jump over to Michael. And just what are the most interesting things you've seen out there?
Well, so can I answer a different question?
Oh, sure. You can answer whatever question you want. By the way, jump in at any point.
In fact.
So talking about eBay, I mean, I love eBay. I'm
always worried people say.
There's no but. Well, there's a but later. But my roommate in law school turned down a very senior position at eBay when it was just a couple of people, and I hear about that weekly still. So
right.
I wish I had started it. But I think that today it'd be really hard to create another eBay. And not because you already have sort of an entrenched position, but even if eBay didn't exist, I think it'd be very hard, because eBay, to me, is a 1.0 company. and it doesn't exhibit many of the traits of what I look for when I look for new companies that I get excited about. And that doesn't mean what you're doing is wrong. It means you're protecting a position. And so that's a segue into what gets me excited. You are in many ways a walled garden. You have to go to eBay to put in your listings or use an API, and then of course you have to go there to buy them as well. Your system isn't distributed at all. And what excites me about the new web is all the content that's being created on the edge of the network in blogs and things like that. And so I see companies that are starting to leverage that, and that's what's getting me most excited. Companies that do something with the edge of the network, and particularly blogs where you have. How many blog posts do you have a second now? Whatever it is. And a lot of it's spam, but a lot of it isn't.
Right. Well, I guess
that's another business model, right. Spam.
Yeah. Right. So, I love eBay, and I think you can go on nearly indefinitely with your existing business model. I think that today it'd be very hard to start a company like that and say, look, we're a walled garden. You have to come to us. We own your data, et cetera, et cetera. So,
what do you think about Etsy, by the way?
Etsy?
Yeah.
Oh, that's not a well-known company. I like Etsy. It's visually very stunning, of course, and that's what I like best about it. I don't know. It's arts and crafts, right? Generally, it's homemade arts and crafts around the world. I wrote about them, I think, in the early fall, and I haven't gone back to them since then because I'm on
it's
an
kind of
arts and
interesting. They're kind of trying to do an eBay for crafts. We're interested in it because of the connection to Make magazine. Because of course it's a lot about handmade stuff, and they're doing things kind of interesting again, picking up from Flickr, things like color-based interfaces. So find me jewelry that's in this color range, find me clothes that are in this color range.
Well, they've done some
interesting interface stuff.
The interface is what's great. It's a lot of people laugh because so many of these companies today are using Ajax, and people start to say, look, okay, great, you can drag and drop stuff around the site. What else do you have? But it really makes a difference because you can treat it as if it was a desktop application, and that's really important. So you can customize it, you can tailor it. It's much quicker to interact with, and I look for that in new applications.
So they'll be the next acquisition by Yahoo, right, Jeremy?
Let me get the list.
Right. Is Ajax on the list of required?
No, Flash. I mean, there's great Flash applications out there as well. And no, you don't have to use Ajax. It's just any time that you're requiring the user to go back. You go back to the database and do stuff, and then come back with a whole new page. It's annoying. And if you don't need to do that, and you can find an intelligent way to not do that, then the customer's better off.
I think you're bringing out a really interesting point, and this is away from business models, but a lot of people latch on to Ajax as the Web 2.0 characteristic because it's safe. It's like making this stuff look like software. And I really think it's not about software. As you said, what's really interesting about Ajax is it's just a better way of making database-backed applications that are more live. But it's really, the shift is that there really are database-backed applications, and the database is what makes them interesting, and the quality of the user participation. And I think that the fact that, say, Flickr, which was originally had stuff done in Flash and then redid it, in Ajax, it wasn't because they had a nifty interface. It was because they figured out how to have really great user participation, really great user APIs, so that people could build cool interfaces against it. How many people here have seen like the Flickr color picker, which is a third-party application built against Flickr? It's just fantastic. It's just like somebody put up a color wheel where you manipulate the traditional color wheel, and then you get a selection of photos out of the Flickr database that are that color. No business model, but just cool new user interface, semantic that now we're starting to see crop up in other sites.
But I would actually say, I think in some ways, Ajax is distracting from business models, right? I mean, that's just I think it creates a more compelling product. But how does that necessarily link into the revenue opportunities? Or, it's like, as you said, like it's really cool, but then there's no business model.
Well,
right?
I think the problem I've seen is people are focusing, everyone jumps up and down about Ajax and fancy UIs, and I agree that that's not sufficient, but it is, I think, a necessary thing, because part of what's happening now is this new browser technology, not even new browser technology, this browser technology that's finally being exploited is really raising the bar on what people's expectations are for web apps. And that means anyone else coming in now and trying to compete has to do the same thing. You need to be at least as good as everyone else out there. But that's just the low end. That's just getting you started. Building on top of that, you need some sort of community. You need some sort of business model. You need so many other things.
Right.
So to me, I see the fancy new drag and drop UI as as a necessary but not sufficient condition to being, you know, a viable thing, whether it's a viable
What do
company.
you guys think about the sort of the critical mass and network effects? You know, Michael, you made the point that you couldn't do eBay today because you know, it's so Web 1.0 in some sense, but it's also because you got that critical mass.
Sure.
And it's hard for new people to come in.
Yeah.
You know, you look at Flickr, you know, there were other photo sharing services, but they seem to do enough of a better job. They got a lot of momentum. But then there's other people like SmugMug and the like who kind of came up. And even though in some ways they may have advantages, they just haven't made a dent. Why is that?
You know, I think you use Flickr as an example. I think they're more, they're in a less entrenched position than a lot of people think, including me until recently. Yahoo, who owns Flickr, is releasing Yahoo Photos, and when they released it, they disclosed some numbers to me, which are public numbers, but Yahoo Photos has 30 million US unique users a month. Flickr has like 8.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, Flickr, while it's very cool, and probably most of the people in this room use it or even pay for it, I certainly have a pro account, I think there's a lot of room for innovation there. I mean, there's Bubble Share, Albert Lai sitting in the front row, and you know, I've actually written about his company, and I think in many ways it's better than Flickr. A 17-year-old created a company called Zoomer that I wrote about 2 weeks ago that, you know, adds geotagging, and you can add sound clips, just neat little features and things that you know, Flickr hasn't released yet. They haven't done video yet, and YouTube's eating their lunch there. So I actually don't think they're in an
The game
position.
is absolutely still open. No question.
So let's talk about, since this is Show Me the Money, and I don't know if you noticed, but I asked Jeremy a question. So this is, I'm going to pretend I'm in the audience asking everybody here a question. So Ajax is really great, and we get this very desktop application feel. What's going to happen to all the ad servers out there? There's 10 years of infrastructure that's built. So how do advertisers actually make money when there is no page refresh? That's a question for the panel.
It's a good one. So, and the question is, will the users care? They will care once the sites start to dry up. So you think you have an answer?
Well, no, I think it's a, I mean, you know, the great thing about technology is that it creates a lot of its own problems that great entrepreneurs get to go out and solve. And so I think that's a problem just waiting to be solved.
Mm-hmm. Well, it just makes it really important to get that right, the ad right the first time.
Well, you know, it doesn't. Yeah, it's true.
Just because the page isn't refreshing doesn't mean that the ad isn't refreshing.
No, in fact, the ad's refreshing over and over and over again, but who's keeping track of it?
No, but there's no reason why you couldn't, for example, have different metrics for what happens to the ad than the rest of the page.
There is no reason why you couldn't.
Yeah.
The question is, how do people do it today?
Well, there's a larger problem that I think about from the point of view of a company that provides a lot of advertising on the web, and it's not an end user problem about page refreshes. It's the problem that if you want to do contextual ad matching, which is all the rage these days, it requires you to be able to go out and crawl that page and see what's on it. But if that page is a single page with a bunch of JavaScript in it doing all sorts of dynamic stuff, a crawler can't make sense of that. Yep. So what you need is some new way of getting information about what is on that page. And that may be a better relationship with the service or the business that's running that service, where they can pass you information about their users or about their content and try to come up with ads or provide better hints to the ad engine so that it'll deliver something relevant. Or maybe it means that instead of a contextual ad model, you need to go after more of an affiliate model. So, you know, the sort of thing that many people have seen success with on eBay is if you know that the user is currently looking at a page about cars, maybe you want to show them, you know, aftermarket car stuff you can sell them.
Yep. So that's kind of interesting, because what you're suggesting is that the technological change can actually shift some power back from the search engines back to the sites in some ways, because they'll have to be actually cooperating more with the search engine.
But I also have to say that's a little bit of you get in trouble, because I think one of the things people like is, geez, I don't want to take care of it. I just want to outsource it. I don't want to think about it. In fact, if you're an ad serving company and you ask a destination site, hey, could you do a bunch of work? You know, they're going to go on to somebody else who requires little work.
I mean, I think people will do whatever makes them the most money.
That's right. Well, yeah, if you ask them to do a bunch of work and can convince them that it's going to give them a 5-fold increase in their ad revenue, they might do it. Right. Yeah. But if you say, well, do this and we think it might help, it's not going to be so compelling.
That's the genius of AdWords, right? I do no work and I make more money.
Right, and that's kind of one of the things that I see as a Web 2.0 characteristic, is this idea of almost plug-in business models. Mm-hmm. You know, at least for startups, the idea that you can plug in, an eBay affiliate model or an Amazon affiliate model or Google AdSense or Yahoo Ad. What do you call yours? Your equivalent?
Yahoo Publisher Network.
That's got a branding problem.
The Shoposphere.
Yeah, but Shoposphere, I like that.
You can still say Overture and we'd know it.
That's right.
Yeah. So I think there is something there, that effectively, Paul Graham has talked a lot about this idea that it's lowered the barrier for startups because they can get some initial revenue while they innovate and maybe even get enough to just make their business go.
Well, the reality is if you step back and look at it, that's not true just of advertising. We're moving toward a world now with all these APIs coming out and self-service systems that we're finally getting to the point, we're starting to get to the point in the web development world that we had, 5, even 10 years ago in the sort of desktop Microsoft type development world, where you could get a catalog in the month a catalog in the mail every month that had all these software components that you could buy for $20 a pop, $100 a pop, or whatever, and use them in your application. Plug in a component here, plug in a component there. That's starting to happen on the web. You want advertising, you can go to any one of a number of companies and sign up that day and use it. You want web analytics, you can go get that, either for free or you can pay for it.
Right.
And there are all sorts of things like that we're now able to start plugging in. I think the future is going to see more and more of that.
Right. Speaking of that, we mentioned earlier Flickr's Pro account, 37 Signals has done the same thing. You get a certain amount of stuff for free, but then there's basically an upsell. To what extent do you see that business model taking over? This idea of the upsell effectively.
That's a good question. It's funny. I made a list. I was making a list earlier of all the different ways people can monetize services, and that's the one that I call it either subscriptions.
Everyone can't see it, but it's actually a 3-dimensional grid that he has.
It's very fancy.
We're using the new Windows presentation.
There you go.
That's right. There's a secret machine in here. And that's a sort of subscription or tiered service model, and that's the one I'm actually least convinced about because I think that's trickiest to scale. You need to get you need to have a service that's sort of in a certain cost ballpark, and you need to have the right mix of paid subscribers to sort of freeloaders, if you want to call them that, or people kicking the tires on the service.
So I love that model. Salesforce.com, I think, is the greatest example of that.
Yeah.
But
Salesforce is catering to businesses. Which is different.
Small businesses, too.
Very different than a consumer service. I just want to make that point.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
was going to say the consumer, just for that, is Yahoo Mail is a great example of that, right? Mail for free, or you could pay to get more storage. And then this other company came around and said, oh, a gigabyte for free. And then that totally blew away, I think, a lot of the money that Yahoo was making from Yahoo Mail. And they had to come up with different models for dealing with that.
The problem with the model is you need to give, Salesforce is a notable exception, but generally you need to give something away for free to give people a taste of what's going on. And let's talk about Flickr. I mean, I think the limitations on Flickr, the one that got me to go pro was I wanted more albums or sets. But there's also limitations on the number of pictures you can upload. And then there's a fine line between, where you go to paid. And I think Flickr's done a good job of it. FeedBurner, which allows people to, burn RSS feeds for their blogs or sites, I think has done a very poor job of it. Their paid product is only $5 a month, but you get so much for free that very, very few people actually end up paying for the product. And so I think that's hard to do. It's hard to know, what to give away for free, if anything, to get people using it.
Yeah, I think FeedBurner, so this kind of breaks into, are we in a world where there's actually multiple revenue streams? Right now, FeedBurner, I agree with Mike that the product may not be compelling to upgrade, but their biggest important metric that they look at is how many feeds are they actually managing. And from their point of view, if they can manage tons and tons of feed, they know some business model will drop out. Well, maybe a relevant advertising model.
That's actually one of the things that, to me, is another Web 2.0 business model that I don't think we've really anybody understands, but there are people who are out there aggregating data at a fantastic pace on the hope that it will one day become valuable. Think, for example, Plaxo or
like Web 1.0.
LinkedIn.
Right,
good examples of that. Where there's a free service. What is the business model? They're waiting for critical mass and hoping that at some point they get it.
So you're talking, the viral nature of these products is really important, and Skype, I think, is a beautiful example of virality gone right. But Plaxo, to me, and I don't want to jump on I don't want to do that. So get their lawyers talking to me anyway. But when you go viral, you need to be careful about what costs you're imposing on the general public, and that's where I think Plaxo gets into some trouble. is that they, there's this general spam cost to the general public that people have to deal with, and the only way to get rid of it is to become a member or go through a long process. So, I think companies need to be careful about that.
But I have to say, I've been, like a lot of people, I've been critical of Plaxo just because I went, hey, it's a pain in the ass. They're always spamming me. But talking with Ram Shriram, who's the guy who funded it, they've got an amazing number of people who actually do use it, and they built up pretty substantial body of information that they think is extremely valuable. At least by rumor, they've turned down very, very significant buyout offers.
So when I was trying to figure out my college degree, I couldn't figure it out. So I worked backwards. I said, what do I not want to be? So does anybody here think the subscription model will work in Web 2.0? So let's work backwards on this. Let's have a show of hands. Everybody keen for subscription models?
Well, when you say work, Royal, what do you mean by work?
Financially successful.
Absolutely. I mean, I have a whether it's Web 2.0 or not, I have, our Safari subscription service is probably about 25% of our sales at this point.
So I think Office Live will be massively popular.
I would actually say that PayPal is actually in some ways a subscription model too. Like if you're just doing peer-to-peer payments, like there's no charge for that. But then a lot of more professional companies, they upgrade to a more company size account, and then they get charged a little bit more for the payments transfer, but they also get values there.
So I'm feeling like I chose the wrong major here.
Well, you mentioned Salesforce a moment ago as being to me, they're one of the poster children for the subscription model.
They're the poster.
Well, also think about someone like Intuit. We're starting to see the blending of the original sort of software shrink wrap model and subscriptions. At the end of the day, Intuit these days is saying, hey, you got to buy the new version. And what's the difference between a subscription and a forced upgrade?
So in everything I just heard, there was a free front end. I think that's correct. There was some kind of free front end.
Except it's how people get to know the product.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it also reduces the risk factor, right? Because you can try it. You can try it for free. You can decide whether it works or not, right? And it's much harder.
The other thing I would say, just kind of looking at subscriptions, not necessarily in the realm of Web 2.0, but there are a lot of. I think there's a big move in Web 2.0 towards information businesses. When I have my sort of give me a couple of slides, where I say Web 2.0 in a nutshell, it's information businesses, delivering software as a service, harnessing collective intelligence. That's kind of the...
See, I think it's about the conversation.
Right, but that's the harnessing collective intelligence part. Where's the conversation?
That's a lot of words to say conversation. I mean, and I think I'm quoting you when I say conversations because you've done a lot of the early work and more recent work on defining this. But go ahead.
I just worry about, the thing that I worry about when I hear words like conversation and community, and I saw this in the conversation with Bill this morning, is a way, it's like putting things into old boxes. There's no conversation in Google, right? But there is harnessing collective intelligence. Absolutely. Every time somebody makes a link on the web.
But that's data harvesting. I mean, to me, right? And there's a business model there, but
right.
Gathering data and doing stuff with it is.
I think there's a lot more sort of implicit data gathering. I think is going to become. There's always explicit, which is the conversation side. But I think there's going to be, as we move, for example, to more and more instrumenting the physical world, whether it's using our cell phones just for shopping or there's going to be massive databases created as a byproduct of our activity. And those things are really instrumenting us, instrumenting the world, and the applications that do that intelligently are going to be able to deliver really interesting results.
I think that's the next web.
Yeah.
I think the web we're in right now is more about user-generated content.
That's fair.
And in particular, if you look at the acquisitions, the reason why we have liquidity in this market is Google went public, then Yahoo bought Flickr, and then things have happened since then. MySpace got bought right after that. If you look at the acquisitions, it's largely lots of user-generated content. And News Corp in particular has been aggressive in the space with MySpace, which is second on the web in number of page views only to Yahoo. Because they want lots of page views to sell advertising into, and their margins go way up because they don't have to pay anyone to create that content. And I think Web 2.0 is a lot of it's about that. Is this user-generated content, which is about conversations, blogging versus GeoCities, and it's simply getting the page views up, selling your company.
But some of that is actually already there today. So, for instance, from eBay, right, we have users. They create the content, but then there's data, right, in terms of how much are things worth, right? Because you can actually value products, right, that aren't new items. And then we have a deal with Intuit.
You're right.
That creates a
my other
product
question
called
for you.
It's Deductible, right? So you've donated your used goods to a charity of your choice, and then your taxes come, and you want to figure out how much that was worth.
Okay, I didn't know about that, but why is it a deal with Intuit? Why isn't it an open API on the web that people can mash it?
We have open licensing. You can license the data, and we also have some developers actually
that's what's
partnering
exciting
with
to me.
that have web
exciting.
services APIs. So the number of tax software is pretty small.
Amazon has an API for pricing history on items, but that's less interesting than the data you have, and I think that that
the Amazon one costs too.
Yeah, it does
for the
cost.
pricing history ones.
Yeah, and yours is free?
No, we charge for that as well. But it's I just wanted to make sure it was clear though that it wasn't like often when people think of Amazon, they think of all their stuff is free, right? But
how about opening up your feedback system?
Yeah. It's something.
I mean, I think the most valuable asset you have, arguably, is the feedback rating for your users, because people engage in transactions to drive that number up.
Yep.
I know I certainly have in the past and wanted to get that number up.
Right.
Why not open that up and allow people to access that API and bring that that reputation outside of eBay?
But
and charge like hell for it.
But here's kind of an interesting thing that I think we're getting at. When you talk about the feedback ratings on eBay, that's one of the candidate systems for an identity subsystem for the web. The way I think about Web 2.0 is we're building an internet operating system, and it's going to have some subsystems that deliver services that can be used by other applications. And some of those services are going to be traditional computer-related things. So, for example, we'll have the storage subsystem. Whether that's right now the hack is, just email myself something to Gmail. I use it as, I don't actually use it for email, but I use it for backup.
Or Amazon's S3 service.
Right, yeah, exactly. So start to be slightly more explicit, Amazon's S3. So those kinds of services. But I also think, if you look at Google Maps, it's becoming the location subsystem. If you're anybody in venture capital in Silicon Valley, in almost every startup pitch, there is some Google Maps integration, right? And the fact is, and
I use Yahoo Maps.
All right. I use Virtual Earth.
Yeah. But the fact is, whoever wins in that, there is sort of a location-based services subsystem that's in play right now. Somebody's going to own that. Somebody's going to be the source. And they're not going to monetize that directly necessarily, but eventually you can bet there's going to be a lot of money riding on that. And it seems to me that identity is another one. Similarly, sort of events. You guys just bought Upcoming. Eventful's still in play. What else is going to be happening there, and how might that play out? You guys have any thoughts on that?
I do.
Yeah.
I think I want to get back to eBay's feedback system briefly. But this is to answer your question.
Why don't we take him out back? Come on, let's just
hold on here. Get the shotgun.
Oh wait, he's not the decision maker on this one.
I think, and I understand why eBay hasn't opened it yet, but I think you should, and you probably will at some point. If you don't open it up and make that data, which is my data, my feedback, I consider my data, somebody else, and there's 4 startups I know of already that are trying to get in the space, is going to do it, and they're going to be successful, and they're going to become the Google Maps of this space. And so while I can understand executives at eBay sitting back and saying, wow, this is such an important asset, it's the main reason why people are willing to engage in cross-country and transcontinental transactions without knowing the person, whereas that doesn't happen on Craigslist. Of course we're going to protect that. Of course we're going to keep it, as part of it. But at some point that has to open up. And I think there's a type of thinking here, Tim, that Web 2.0 companies have, that Web 1.0 companies don't have. And when they do have it, they turn into 2.0 companies, which is, and Yahoo has done it, by the way, is data, user-generated data, even data that's been aggregated and massaged and done things with, is still owned by the user. And they have to have the ability to do their own things with that. And if you try to stop it, that's fine, but somebody else is going to let that data out, and it's going to be something wonderful, and you're going to lose. And so that, to me, it's a whole mindset around Web 2.0, and it goes back to conversation, but user-generated content and all that. So.
Yeah, the thing that I think about, though, with business models, and this actually kind of goes back to subscriptions a little bit, Royal. There are a lot of subscription models in software that people, I don't know why, they just kind of like have blinders and don't notice. I mean, how many people here pay a subscription to their ISP? I mean, everybody, right?
Actually, while we're on questions, how many people here are content providers? And how many people here provide some kind of services? Because I think when you start thinking about subscriptions, they're very different if you're a content provider and if you're a services provider.
Sure.
Yeah.
But where I wanted to go was another subscription that almost everybody pays. How many people have your own domain name? Right? How many of you pay for it by subscription, effectively? It's an annual subscription. And here was kind of an interesting thing. That was a monopoly originally handed to a company because nobody understood how valuable that data was. You know, Network Solutions, or you know, when they had that originally, or what was it called then? Was they basically they were doing it under government contract. The government said, "We want you to do it for one more year." They were saying, "No, don't make us do it." And the government said, "Do it for another year." At the end of the year, it was like, "We're giving this up like hell we are," you know. And they've been fighting tooth and nail to keep that a monopoly ever since. And you know, they slowly, you know, I think GoDaddy finally passed them as the biggest domain name registrar recently. But the fact is, here was this business model that was actually built on the back of a piece of free and open source software.
Is it Internic?
No, well, there was,
ICANN?
no, I think it was who was the original? Well, SAIC owns it all now, but
No, it's VeriSign owns it now. It's SAIC, had NSI. They
had NSI, right? Yeah, whatever we rolled up.
And they still have a monopoly on the domain name registry business,
Yeah.
you know, which actually is a database. And then
So the point is that there often are hidden business models that can be, you know, built in some of these spaces. And I really think, you know, one of the reasons I talk about this all the time is because I want people to be aware that you could wake up one morning and discover that somebody else owns something that's very valuable to you and is going to start charging you for it. You know, so whether it's your reputation data, you know, and so there are things like Attention Trust, which is really trying to get out there and say, you own your clickstream data, somebody else doesn't own it. And I think, you know, we could all get taken by surprise at one point. You know, I mentioned again this morning this idea of you know, telematics data as your car gets instrumented, you know, that somebody's going to own where you travel and they're going to resell it. I just saw actually the government is about to approve something where credit bureaus are going to be able to resell your credit history, right? You know, this is basically your data that is, you know, being aggregated by someone else, and they have a hell of a business model around it.
And we need to find a way to make that all free.
Well, either that or accept the consequences. You know, I mean, the fact is that, you know, some of it's, you know, you can live with, but it's good to be aware of some of these hidden business models.
One thing I just wanted to re-mention is that there are microphones here if anyone's got questions. I know we've been up here for a while talking. And
Oh, there we go.
Yeah, I've got a question for you. So, Tim, you said that if you go very quickly, then a Web 2.0 company is an information business delivering software as a service that harnesses collective intelligence. To me, that sounds like a pretty good description of Charles Schwab. So there's got to be something more than that, right? I mean, collective intelligence in the market, software as a service, and it's an information business. So there's got to be something more than that makes something a Web 2.0 company. And I've always thought it was, in fact, the opposite of what you said, Michael, which is that they do own the data. It seems to me that Web 2.0 companies acquire data and do whatever they can to prevent it from being pulled out. I mean, there is no API to extract your reputation or to extract your buying patterns or to extract anything else from Web 2.0 companies. So what is it that, I mean, and to me this makes perfect sense because this is lock-in. But what is it about this owning of customer data? I mean, why didn't you mention that when you gave your very short version, Tim, and Michael, it seemed like you left out a word "not" there.
Let me put it this way. I mean, first off, I think that when you talk about the stock market is, in fact, a very early Web 2.0 phenomenon. Because ultimately, you know, to me, Web 2.0 is about the behavior of network systems. And the stock market is a network system. You know, whether Charles Schwab is a network system or not, I'm not sure. I don't know enough about how they work their business. But certainly, you know, any you know, sort of market mechanism has a lot of those characteristics. And in fact, studying those markets is a really good way to understand our future, because this was a specialized domain that did things that only now are becoming ubiquitous in a much broader range of areas. You know, there was enough reason for, you know, so look at the stock market economy and the kinds of companies that have taken roles there, what kind of business models they've played, and you actually have a microcosm, I think, of some of the Web 2.0 opportunities as we move towards fully networked markets. Financial liquidity and financial markets are actually a good predictor of where we're going with, say, the identity market. And that's why Seth Goldstein with you know, Root Markets is really, you know, again, I think he's a little bit out on a limb there, but he's got this idea that all this attention data that we're all generating as we visit websites does in fact have characteristics a lot like financial markets, and that in fact, you know, that can be aggregated and made valuable in the way that financial data aggregation has become valuable.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, when people are basically saying bid and ask for how much they're going to value a stock, like, that's a conversation, right, that people are having, right? It's just like on a local market. I mean, very similar like eBay, right? We think of it the same way, right? It's just a global marketplace, but, you know, all the listings are user-created content, right? All the bids are basically people having, it's not the conversation like I'm writing blog posts, but it's a send, like you're sending a message to a person saying, I think this is worth $7.51, right? And
you know, market makers are kind of like spammers, right?
And yet I can take all my data back from my broker, or I can take all my data back from NASDAQ, but I can't take all my data back from eBay.
How do you take your data back from NASDAQ if you're a, you know, publicly traded stock?
Well, if I'm a stock, the only way I can take my data back from NASDAQ is to move it to another, right? Move it to
another exchange.
NYSE.
Mm-hmm. And in
so
fact,
I think this is key. I think the ownership of data is key.
Whatever the price of a stock is going to be reflected into the ongoing conversation of what's a company worth.
There is a point which you may or may not be making that I want to address, which is there are companies that I consider to be the poster children of Web 2.0, like Delicious and Flickr, that do hold your data in trust for you. I mean, they do other things with it to make money or to create a network effect. But Delicious, you know, I can download as an API. I can download all of my bookmarks and have done so, you know, very easily. Flickr has a somewhat restricted API for me to download all of my pictures. I think that needs to become unrestricted, although I'm happy for them to pay for. I'm happy to pay for it.
There's a tool you can get that'll download and back up everything for you locally.
Okay, great. But I mean, that's important to me. I mean, my bookmarks and my pictures and you know, WordPress, which is what I use to write my blog. You know, these things are important for me to get that data back because I own it. Now, if they need to, and they're explicit in telling me they need to do things to match up the data and to do things to make money, then I'm fine with that as long as I understand what it is they're doing. But at the end of the day, I own that data and I need to get access to it and move it. And that's the difference between an eBay, which doesn't let me do that yet, although they're moving in that direction, and, you know, Web 2.0 companies.
I'm a little confused though, because our APIs allow you to get back all your data.
When I said you're moving in that direction.
Well, I don't understand what the difference is between your Delicious bookmarks, getting a copy of that.
Well, can you delete them?
Right, with Delicious,
can I have an API to move it into Craigslist? Now, that would require Craigslist allowing that, but Oodle, for instance, you know, that's what I'm talking about. Now, you have added RSS to your seller stores, and that's a really important development. And I think it's embracing, you know, some of the Web 2.0
Many of our
stuff.
sellers are multi-channel.
Yeah, well, but not once the data is into eBay, you can't export it out in a usable format to the edge.
But if you have your data in some format, right? You have it in a database. You're converting it to some XML format to put it in eBay.
Yeah.
There's really no difference in converting it to some XML format to put it into eBay versus converting it to an XML format to put it someplace else.
The difference is,
as compared to putting it into eBay and then getting a copy of the same data back and then sending it someplace else.
So I think there is an issue that you're bringing out, which is that at least ideally, we would like to have data mobility as one of the characteristics of Web 2.0 applications. I don't know that, first of all, I would say that any Web 2.0 application will have some but not all characteristics of Web 2.0. Yeah. You know, and the way I think about it, you know, and the reason why I use the definition I did is ultimately, are they using the network as a platform? Are they using the network as a platform to, in some way that is interesting and new and really takes advantage of its networkness? And some companies do one aspect of it really, really well, A good example, when iTunes first came out, for me, it was a Web 2.0 poster child because it was this software beyond the level of a single device kind of idea. But if you looked at the iTunes Music Store, there was very little participation. They've gradually added more of that over time. They're still not great at that, but they do this other thing so well that I go, well, you got to hold them up as a model, because ultimately that's part of the paradigm too. The fact that there's the cloud, and then there's a sort of a possible chain of devices that interact with the data in the cloud. And they've got that aspect down, whereas, for example, Flickr, I think, has done a really good job on, openness, user participation, building APIs that let people reuse the stuff. Someone else may have some, Navtech, I think, is a Web 2.0 company because they actually have a data source that's used by a bunch of Web 2.0 applications, even though in other ways they're completely, old generation company.
Well, I think the data mobility issue is, there are degrees of data mobility, right?
Yeah.
And if the Rayazi web clipboard demo we saw recently is any indication, there's a lot of hope, and I think we're headed in the right direction there. I think the key issue here is eBay's lock-in, right? eBay's lock-in is that reputation data. And that's the thing that people want portability in. And one thing eBay could do is offer that as a service and even charge for it. And say,
exactly, and that's the thing.
Here's a thing, here's a micro format, a badge, or something you can put in your Craigslist posting, pay eBay a nominal amount of money, and this is a guaranteed, unspammed way to identify that, yeah, you've got a great reputation as a seller.
I think that's a really good point. There are a lot of applications that have built a competency and some power, and they have the ability to turn that into a system service.
Right.
And again, you've obviously done that with your deductible service, but this reputation area would be a great area.
So maybe what this really is Web 2.0 is more of a partnership with data, because eBay, we just defined it earlier as being a Web 1.0 company. And if you
Michael defined it.
It's still progressing. But the idea is that this is a panel for show me the money, and guess what? I don't have to have a big factory to create industry any longer. There's users and there's also people that create businesses, and so now every individual in the room can create these giant industries.
Yeah, by the way,
by having a partnership with people that actually have data, by aggregating the data. I think Google showed us that the AdSense concept is pretty potent out there. You share a little bit with me, I'm going to share some with you back, and we're going to make this thing grow exponentially.
Yeah, I think that brings up an interesting point. When you talk about the Google model, one of the aspects of that model is the fact that it's a lot like the MasterCard or Visa model. Collect a little bit from a lot of people. This is at least in the sort of AdSense piece of it. And I think that is, we've seen that in the eBay space. Just a little tax on a transaction, a little tax on some service you provide. Is one of the more powerful and scalable models that we've seen.
Got a guy who's been here for a while.
Okay, sorry.
Well, and this kind of ties into what y'all are talking about. Y'all kind of skirted up against it. And the thing that confuses me with the conversation is that Web 2.0 is great from a kind of technological free love, everybody shares everything type of a situation.
Right.
When you get into situations like eBay has invested an awful lot in what it has, and it seems like the conversation has turned to almost a very aggressive connotation, this sense of entitlement that someone or a company like eBay or Microsoft now owes it to the community to give to the community. And when he even hesitates, he gets pushback. And that's why I'm confused about where does the conversation end.
But I think he makes a good point.
No,
I mean,
it's certainly other people have that point. I mean, you always pick on the big guy. But let me make a point, which is historically companies that have really rich revenue streams sort of locked in, and eBay is a clear example. Historically, always, especially when they're publicly held, they bite it. They hold on to that revenue stream while their competitors innovate, and they end up in the end just losing. And eBay, now I'm not saying that's happening to eBay. Now eBay's done some things right. They bought Skype, and that was pretty smart. And they own PayPal, and that's pretty smart. And they've also launched Kijiji, which is a Craigslist competitor, and it's dirt free, and that's competitive to eBay. They also own part of Craigslist, but their core business, at some point, they're going to have to. I don't know the exact numbers, but eBay takes something like 7 to 8% of an item's value among all their different fees before PayPal, so the listing fee and then the enhancement fees. At some point, that has to end because Craigslist has set a standard of free. And Craigslist is very, very big and very popular. they do not have a sustainable business model. And I think the right thing for them to do is to ditch it, especially the listing fees, really only the listing fees, and to try something a little bit new. And in the end, they'll be much bigger. And I don't think they're going to do that because no one ever has. But that's my only point. Not that they owe it to us. Hey, I want them to make money. And if I was a stockholder, I'd want to make money. I just don't think it's sustainable. That's all I'm saying.
Well, this is just classic innovator's dilemma. It's the big well-run companies don't know when it's time to sort of eat your cash cow and start the new business. Yeah. And if you don't ever do that, then you're threatened by all the upstarts that have a completely different worldview and realize that the infrastructure, the technology, and people's usage of this technology has changed in the last 5 years, and they're willing to do things they previously weren't willing to do. And then they come out of nowhere and eat your lunch.
But I think the point, though, is important that in Web 2.0, people are almost militaristic in wanting to be open. And that, I think, is a big difference between Web 2.0 and 1.0.
I don't think that's actually, I think this certainly maybe gets overstated by some segments of the Web 2.0 population, maybe Michael included.
Maybe Michael's the RMS.
Well, yeah, I was shaking my head yes when he said that.
But the Richard Stallman.
This is not like the free software debate, but I do think that there are, if you look at, say Linux and Unix, they both have a similar architecture, and that architecture is what's interesting about it. And it's an architecture where you don't assume that there's a central controlling player, or there is. I guess there's a very small one. A small kernel. You basically, there's a design of a system with rules for cooperation. And I think the point is, we've got to figure out the rules for cooperation between applications rather than that we're trying to figure out a system that somebody controls and has built them all in one place. Yeah. That was, I think one of my sort of, aha moments this is back in 1998 talking with Linus Torvalds about Linux. And he's kind of a skeptic about some of the free software ideology, and he actually said, I couldn't have built, Windows. I mean, I couldn't have done what I did for Linux with Windows, even if I had a copy of the source code. I.e., all this stuff about, source access isn't really the point. He said it was the architecture. It was the fact that this is an architecture that let me, as a student, build a small kernel that could plug into this whole other system. It was a piece of software I could get my arms around. Whereas Windows is something that's built by a large team at a large company, and so in a way, what we're really talking about, I think, in Web 2.0 is this a future in which we've figured out the rules of cooperation between applications, such that some small group of individuals can write something great and have it be a first-class citizen, or are they doomed to basically be out of business because the big guys control all the knobs and levers?
Well, I guess
so it's openness in that sense,
But I think you're actually supporting his view. I think.
Michael Bell, the reason why Bell stopped supporting Linux and the help desk is they had so many flavors of it they couldn't support. Because anytime they supported one version, they had a kid screaming at them that they were supporting the wrong one. That's why they stopped supporting.
Yeah, that's fair.
Tim, we should take one. I mean,
someone was actually.
Yeah, somebody was back over
we've beaten them away.
No,
go back. Go back. We need you.
Now this is the architecture participation.
Yeah, we're sort of blinded up here is one of the problems.
Sorry, it's a little bright.
Yeah.
Hey, thanks. I just have this, this idea of moving data around, and the themes that I'm pulling out of this are, your Web 2.0 business has to rely on some sort of data, and if you can't supply it, then you have to get it. Delicious, give me your bookmarks. Flickr, give me your photos. And I'm hearing OpenXML, which is great to center around this great user experience, but it still seems like it's coming down to advertising. Come to my website, and we'll sell advertising. And if the great user experience, you can always call a JavaScript function to get a new ad from the server. eBay takes a cut of a transaction. But do you see an opportunity to monetize on this data? Like I'm not going to pay Delicious to keep my bookmarks, but what other revenue streams are out there that are centered around data that really don't revolve around advertising that you think that people are willing to pay for?
So the more things change, the more they stay the same. I think these numbers are correct. advertising out there is $400 to $600 billion. I don't know what other businesses are bigger than that. Maybe oil's up there. What else? Maybe pharmaceutical.
There is a whole class of companies. Go ahead.
But the idea is that just we will see advertising be a predominant business model online, just as we saw advertising be a predominant business model offline. I think that's just the natural evolution.
From my perspective, I also sort of view two types of Web 2.0 apps. There's one which basically just has information, right? It's basically a read-only API or read-only interface. And from my standpoint, that one is only advertising. There's only two models for that. It's pretty much advertising or sell Yahoo, right? And I think of Google as the best example of, I mashed up the entire world and I got PhD students to figure out how to sort it, and they can only make money through AdWords, right, for their advertising. And then there's ones that are read and write, which is like a service, which is like eBay or Salesforce or Overture or whatever. And those, then when you're providing a service, then there's a chance for the service to have a value. And if the service does have a value to a person, right, maybe the Delicious, you place it at 0 value. Maybe, but other people might place it at more, right? And Flickr certainly does have a value because people have subscriptions, right? And in those cases, when you have an application that's read and write and it has a service, then that's really where I think you
I would
can
also
make money.
add that I don't think that advertising, it is the, as you say, the largest probably, but there are certainly subscriptions are a very real place. I mean, look at, again, Second Life, another great example, subscriptions, but they also have people buying and selling virtual goods in that space. A lot of the games actually now have an economy around them that have to do with creation, actually manufacturing of virtual goods. There's, anyway, we'll kind of...
So why don't we...
The tiered model actually does work.
Yeah.
We just need to find the balance of what do you give for free, what do you charge for.
That's right. And in fact, small companies, I think the tiered model is sometimes very effective. I mean, 37 Signals is a great example, I think, of a company that's done that.
It's actually more powerful today because, I don't know how many people date back to, packaged software, right? But you need a distribution. Today, what's distribution? It's, somehow, plug it in the blogosphere, get a little viral.
Great example. I mean, these are not, I don't know if you'd call them Web 2.0 because they've been around for a while, but Hot or Not, is basically, they've added a dating service, where it's like, hey, you basically, they'll match people when two people think that the other one is hot. They'll offer to introduce you for a fee.
There's a company, and we've been asked to keep our answers brief so we can get through more questions, but there's a company I want to mention that is in advertising called, I always get it wrong, Podbop. And they actually won the best company at Tag Camp. And what they do is it's an RSS feed that you subscribe to, and you get bands that are playing locally in your area. You get an RSS feed saying, the concert information. And there's an enclosure, which is an MP3 file of a song that the band has created, and if the band wants that to happen. They are creating an incredible demand curve of people who like live music and want to know what's going on in their local area, as well as the genres and things that they like. That's a great advertising model because bands and labels will go to them and pay almost any amount of money to sort of get in front of this audience. And so,
one of these guys.
Who's been next? Yeah, we'll go over here.
I'm Sébastien Provencher from Yellow Pages Group in Canada. I actually have a very selfish business model question for you guys, and basically the idea is, how do you morph a traditional media company into a Web 2.0 business while continuing to make money, basically? Because as you know, Yellow Pages company is a big aggregator of content. We're also a trusted source. And I don't want any answers about you're all going to die anyway, so just sit down.
But you are going to die. I mean, there's no reason why. I mean, Yellow Pages for me are a particular sore subject because you charge so much. You have huge economic rents you can charge, and it's all going to go away. It is. It's all going away.
You are so dead.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, Canada's socialist, so it's your.
Yeah, we've got 35% reach in Canada, so every month. It's not like in the U.S. we're actually more successful on that.
It's a really good question, and I think in the light of some recent announcements, it's a question that a lot of newspapers around the country have been asking themselves. And,
I think they are dead. No,
and everyone's saying they're all dead, right?
Now, the thing that I would say about all that is think about what service you can offer. Think about what service you offer now. And then you go, okay, if somebody is offering that service for free, is there anything else you can do with the competencies that you have, the connections you have, that's new and interesting that people would be willing to pay for. And I think I don't have any answers for the Yellow Pages business, but my guess is that the free services, they're pretty good, but there is still value to be added.
Well, I would say that eBay is not free, and Yellow Pages is like eBay. It's a marketplace. Absolutely.
There are very successful marketplaces, Yellow Pages being moved online. A really good example is, I'm getting a brain fart here. It's a company that's basically taken on the Thomas Register, which is a kind of specialized, they're up in Buffalo. I'll think of the name. But they basically got like 2 million engineers signed up, and they basically have a Yellow Pages model. Very targeted advertising. People are searching. It's sort of a parameterized search engine, so that you can say, I need something with a 3/8" left-handed Framus, and it finds it for you, and then connects you to the manufacturer. And it's again a Yellow Pages. So, for example, you could make a much smarter Yellow Pages that's a lot better at helping people find what they really want than a search engine. If you can figure that out, you're a winner.
There was this 1975, Ted Levitt did this article, Harvard Business Review, Marketing Myopia, and it kind of set the standard for all of this kind of question, and that is, how does an industry actually plan its own obsolescence? And, you look at it, the train industry thought they were in the train business, and, all of a sudden cars came along. Movie business thought they were in the movie business, and, every industry has to plan for its own obsolescence. So, in a way, this is kind of a big picture internal discussion you need to have. What do you want to be next when you grow up? And you have all the assets in the world. I think you were about to start saying things like you have a huge installed base and certainly huge revenue streams, relationships and things like that. So the way old media companies turn into new media companies from an entrepreneurial point of view is do a skunkworks. Get some Web 2.0 people, throw them in a room off campus, right, where they're not unencumbered by any kind of bureaucracy, and just tell them, what do we do next?
Yeah, and I can't stress that enough, is start experimenting as soon as possible. This is one of the things we're doing as a Web 1.0 company making that transition to 2.0 is you've got to be willing to experiment. You've got to be willing to fail in some or many cases before you get it right. And sometimes it means buying people or bringing new people in, but it also means taking chances. And most importantly, I think, is talk to your customers. Ask them what it is about the web and about how the web is changing what they do that they need help with. Because they may not be telling you that right now.
We should go on to the next question here.
Hi. My name is Dan Crow. I'm the CIO of Autotrader.com, which is a large automotive classified site. And it's a similar question. We did a good job of taking...
You're kind of Yellow Pages.
Well, in a way, right? We took a big hunk out of the newspaper's hides and made a lot of money doing that. But I would characterize us as a Web 1.0 company. What do you think and I'll make it a more general question, what do you think the Web 2.0 opportunities are for the big paid classified sites? Is it go deeper in your vertical? Is it better user experience? Because we do have a lot of assets, right? Huge database of vehicles, huge number of paying customers, millions and millions of unique visitors.
So this is probably a business you don't want to give away free cars, because that would probably
free cars are tough.
Yeah, that'd probably be bad for your business.
Or free ads, frankly. We don't want to do
Everyone
that.
here would like it, but...
Right. So, but I'm hearing what you're saying. It's like we did a good job of making newspapers obsolete in a sense, but we look at Craigslist and Google, and are they going to make us obsolete, or what do we have to do to prevent that? What are your thoughts?
I think it's a question for Michael. You're dead. You're dead. You're dead. It's over. You're the newspapers.
So my startup is in the online classified space, and I'd love to actually have a conversation with you after that, because we're running out of time, but I'd love to have a conversation with you afterwards.
He wants to sell you something.
I would love to
He's
sell you
got a business
That's
model.
the Web
even if you
2.0
don't.
business model there.
I'm being much nicer to him.
Yeah, I know.
I mean, one of the things I would say is you have an interesting data asset in that you know something about a lot of people who own a particular kind of car, and that would be a potentially interesting asset to explore in another direction.
You could also list them on eBay Motors. I feel I got to put the product plug in.
Well, I think anyone that gets a sizable audience in a fairly specialized area has very valuable resources when it comes to targeting. And I think one thing that still has a long way to go online when it comes to classifieds and advertising and whatnot is location-specific services and location-specific advertising, including stuff that shows up on your little cell phone, not just on your PC.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that, kind of what that brings up is one of the things you could do is aggressively integrate with interesting new applications that are potential sort of target vectors for getting your information out. As I say, sorry, over here.
I guess we got to swap sides.
Hi there. It seems like one of the Web 2.0 things is this idea of collective intelligence. Does that mean that the old publishing models like Tim's and my company, which is Thomson Corporation, does that mean those publishing models are going to be obsolescent as well?
Yes, we're going to die, right?
Right.
Die. No, I think. Let me take that one because I've been thinking a lot about it, and I have to say I'm working my way up to getting the courage of my convictions about doing something aggressively wiki in the book space, because it's pretty clear that Wikipedia is definitely teaching us something about what a 21st century book looks like, and we better get with the program. We're also doing some other things. We've introduced this Rough Cuts program where people can get early access to books under development. Our Safari service, we're really thinking about the book as database. We have a web services API against it, and we've got some people who are actually having it show up as the help in their products and stuff like that. So, we're playing with it, but I don't think we've been bold enough as publishers. The one thing I think we really have to worry about, there's two or three things. One, we have to worry about the spread of sort of page image sort of approaches to online books, such as we see from Google and Amazon, because they don't really have a lot of flexibility in terms of interesting derivative applications. Secondly, we really have to worry about those guys don't get too much control over the content. Effectively, the content needs to sort of the model needs to be sort of a multi-provider model with these guys as aggregators, as opposed to, they've done some heavy lifting by doing a lot of digitization, and I worry that they would end up saying, well, this puts us in the driver's seat, and we have to watch for that. But other than that, we just have to get out there like everybody else and say, what does our business look like when, to use Clay Shirky's phrase, Clay Shirky was the first one who put it so succinctly. He said, Thomas Watson once said we need no more than 5 computers in the world, and everybody laughed because they thought of the hundreds of millions or billions of computers. And he said, we now know that he overstated the number by 4. And that's the future. The future is it's all connected all the time, and our computers are really just devices that connect us to that global computer. And what are the services look like in that global computer? That's what Web 2.0 is like.
Essentially, eBay is, I guess, a market maker, providing liquidity, creating market efficiency. Recently, eBay, together with Google, I think, invested in a Spanish company named FON, F-O-N. And essentially, I think, if I understand correctly, what FON does is actually providing a secondary market for broadband. So does this actually signifies maybe the obsolescence of the ISP market, Because now people will be able to basically purchase broadband from each other and actually create ad hoc networks, Wi-Fi networks.
Yeah, unless there's regulatory sort of counterattacks. It could be the same kind of situation we had with Napster, where Napster showed us where individuals and where the network wanted to go, but they didn't have the last word.
So I can totally see an open source solution in the future, maybe.
I don't actually know anything about that, but I'm sure other people.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool. And I think eventually we'll get there, but I think there's going to be some pretty serious regulatory skirmishing, where people will call, existing players will call on, governments to aid them against these upstarts who are trying to change the world.
This is a huge area. Just the regulation around this area is hugely debated, and there's actually something I ridiculed at first called One Web Day, which is a group of people trying to do something about this, and I ridiculed it because they had a hand signal, and I thought it was really dumb. But there's some really smart people behind it: Mary Hodder, Doc Searles, Susan Crawford, and some others. And if you're interested in the space, you might want to take a look at that. I think it's onewebday.org. It's a site.
Yeah, you might also.
What's that?
It's September 22nd.
There you go.
Why don't we jump over here?
Actually, he was first.
All right.
This guy.
Okay.
He was first.
Oh, I was first? Sure. I'm Shannon Clark. I run a conference called Mesh Forum, and I'm very interested in networks of all types. And I'm kind of curious, as you think about Web 2.0, the conversation here has been very consumer-facing. But I'm curious what you think the role of these kind of immersive apps talking to each other is when you think about them in terms of business ecosystems. I mean, eBay obviously really is more of a business ecosystem than it is the consumers. And I'm curious, if we think about a lot of the apps that are coming out, are there ones that are emerging that some of you know of that are thinking about how they help other people actually conduct business as opposed to simply providing a cool new GUI feature?
I can give you a general. I think some of the really high-end consulting stuff might start sliding away. I mean, when there was nice silos, proprietary stuff, you really needed a big consulting industry to glue everything together. Then all of a sudden you start, jumping into .NET type of stuff and all of us XML and all that, and everybody's talking. And, from a global perspective, I think those kind of businesses start sliding away.
Well, I misunderstood the question. It was a question.
So who's building businesses around enabling
other
businesses to do?
Well, and also, are there apps coming up that are helping people with actual business transactions, so the actual exchange of value between businesses or consumers with businesses? So not just I'm going to see advertising and consume it, but the purpose of advertising is to.
Are you talking about like web services? Things you can plug in?
I'm talking about actual, in the real world, I give money for a product or a service. Are there web tools that are emerging to help that happen more frequently?
I think what Tim was talking about.
The Web 2.0 version of EDI, for example.
I mean, it's going to be a pluggable OS going forward.
Yeah.
We find that with
But the question is, who's doing that in an interesting way? And it is interesting. An awful lot of the hype is around the consumer-facing stuff. And I don't think enough attention has been paid, as you say, to that kind of plumbing. And I think we'll suddenly be surprised to discover that there's some company has been doing it and has grown a very big business there without us noticing.
On a really minimal level, people have really embraced RSS.
Yeah.
So, where that used to be very proprietary work, now it's, remember when you used to do big email broadcast systems and, required listeners and, all kinds of custom database work and all that stuff. And now, you can really blast one of these things out in about 3 seconds.
I'll also say that there's a whole area of monetization we didn't talk about that much, which is web services. Not mashups, but the companies that are serious about providing, web services that are part of those mashups. And the real power company here is Amazon, and they got serious last week when they announced S3, which Tim, I think somebody mentioned, which is Jeremy, which is just it's dirt cheap grid storage. You can get 100 gigabytes for I think it's $15 a month, which is much cheaper than anyone else has done, and it's high end bandwidth and things like that. So they're going to make a lot of money, and so I think it's interesting for this whole conversation. But they also will facilitate the creation of whole new classes of companies that couldn't be created before because they couldn't build a robust enough back end for storage in this case, but they have Mechanical Turk and they're releasing other stuff.
Same thing with opening up the Alexa Spider. They're really looking at building system services.
No it's pretty clear when I talk to startup companies about what services we as Yahoo or big companies like us can provide. They pretty much all have the same things they want. They want those sorts of things that are pretty much common plumbing that every company needs to build, everyone like them needs to build, that it doesn't do anything to distinguish them. They want to focus on their core service or their core features. They don't want to build yet another registration system, yet another storage platform, yet another payment system, yet another advertising system. They want to do the thing that's going to make them stand out. They want to be able to plug into different services.
We found that our sellers, we found that actually our developers do that for the businesses, right? They're mashing up basically eBay, PayPal for payments, Postal Service, UPS, maybe Salesforce for CRM, maybe with Overture or Google for advertising. I mean, these are aimed at small and medium businesses, and those are mashing up 6 different services, things that before you would have to do deals to figure out all this dynamic pricing, how to handle all the payments, how to do all the sales platforms. So they exist.
Right. There are also specialized companies in particular verticals. For example, Yodlee in financial services is an example of somebody who's basically figuring out the connection between all the bank's front ends and various back ends for payment processing and effectively becoming a sort of a web services integrator. And I think the thing about a lot of these companies is they're invisible because they aren't particularly consumer facing. They're actually business to business companies, and therefore they're more off the radar.
Why don't we do 2 quick 30-second
over here?
Yeah, we got a minute and a half.
Okay, 1.5. Okay, the first, just a comment on the data ownership. I think the emergent pattern is that the APIs offer me as a user to get back all the data that I put in, but not much else. And the general API, the open data, that's much more limited. So I can't get all pictures from Flickr or from Delicious. I can't get all pages for a tag like Ajax that's very popular. I only get the first 100 or so.
Well, you're confusing the API versus the rate limits or usage limits applied to those APIs.
Exactly.
Right.
So
and that's in fact a business model, which
that's a business decision, not a technology issue.
Exactly.
We could let you do that.
Yes, and that's where the Web 2.0 business model comes in. And the question from this side is, what do I earn if I give out this data, or what's my benefit from providing this data either for free or for a fee like eBay does? And to get, I wanted to comment on something this guy with the classified said, because he sits in an interesting position. If we look at his business models, you got to do it in about
20 seconds.
Okay, and he's being killed by the aggregators. But these aggregators give free traffic to him. So his old business model was charging for traffic that he has to buy for a lot of money. But now the aggregators come in and give basically all this traffic for free. So he has to shift up, but he has to shift up his offer that he can charge this money for not just the traffic, but something on top of it, like nice images or good presentation of the classified stuff like that. But he saves a lot of money in for promotion.
So what's the question here?
We're already over time.
It was a comment, sorry.
We want to
comment on the classifieds.
We'll take this last question because he's been waiting. Yeah.
Thanks. Well, I think we're all more technocrats and capitalists than maybe civil libertarians in here. When we're talking about things like reputation services, I get really worried. I look at what, the quality of service TransUnion, for instance, provides out there, and the fact that I can't affect that data that really affects my life. So I kind of wanted to get some comments from you guys about, some of the civil libertarian aspects or some of the political aspects of these kind of changes that technology firms can bring. Because things like reputation services, if they're anywhere near as badly implemented as what we have today, I don't want any of it.
So just a real quick one. When I was at MessageCast and we were not part of Microsoft, we created this broadcast system. And this broadcast system, we had a feature in there that we knew people would need, businesses would need, and that is, customer calls up and says, hey, look, unsubscribe me. I don't know how to do it, right? And so we built that feature in so that a customer service person can take people off the list. And Microsoft just absolutely slapped us down and said, take that out of there right now. Absolutely not. If you can take somebody from the list, that means you can add somebody to the list without their permission. And we're making a promise to customers, and that is they're totally in control. I actually believe that's a real RSS theme, and I don't think that's, Microsoft's just doing it. I think Yahoo's doing it. I think Google's doing it. I think all the big players are doing it. So in a civil libertarian way, I think all the big players are really taking a leadership role here. And how do you monetize that? You can't. It's just, the necessary gate that you have to go through to get to maybe Web 2.0, but certainly Web 3.0.
But I would there's a wonderful phrase from Cory Doctorow. He says, every complex system has its parasites. And we are going to have problems. No question. And, in some sense, we won't deal with the civil liberties issues till some of those problems come to the fore and people care enough about them. And I think, the fact is there are going to be a lot of blood spilled. And, it's already battling. See somebody just sued Google about, Google's reputation system. They demoted somebody for being a spammer, and these guys think that's unfair. And, we're going to see a lot of these things in the courts, and we're going to have a lot of trouble before it all gets sorted out. And, probably will never be sorted out to the satisfaction of people who really care about civil liberties.
Well, I think it's a bloody path in the right direction.
Yeah. So. All right. Well, thank you very, very much. And
thank you, guys.